Hello gamers, welcome to Game Recap. In this video, I will discuss the storyline of the game Dying Light, a survival horror video game developed by Techland and published by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment. Dying Light is set in a Middle Eastern city called Harran. Before discussing the storyline, first I will discuss a little about the background story of this game. Starting in 2014, it is said that the city of Harran will host a national sports week called the Harran Global Athletic Games. However, before the sports week was held, several violent incidents spread in the city of Harran, which eventually revealed that the people who carried out the violence turned out to have been infected with a new virus, a type of rabies, which causes people infected with the virus to behave wildly and bite other people and transmit the virus. The Minister of Health then advised the Harran city government to postpone the upcoming National Sports Week to deal with the problems caused by the virus. However, the suggestion was later rejected because the government of Harran underestimated the virus and was more concerned with the benefits that would be obtained from the National Sports Week, which was believed to be able to boost the city's economy. Due to not complying with the warnings of the Minister of Health and continuing to hold a National Sports Week, the spread of the virus became increasingly out of control and many people began to be infected with a virus that caused them to behave like zombies. Over time, the number of people infected with the virus is far more than the number of people who are not infected. The central government then ordered the implementation of isolation and quarantine zones throughout Harran to prevent the virus from spreading to other areas. To help overcome the problems caused by the virus, a humanitarian organization called Global Relief Efforts, or GRE, is helping survivors who are still trapped in the city by sending regular supplies of food and a vaccine they call antizin, which has an effect only temporary. At the same time, the GRE scientists try to examine the characteristics of the virus that is spreading very quickly in the city of Harran. Over time, the zombie virus epidemic in Harran has not been resolved and scientists have also not been able to find a bright spot regarding a vaccine that can cure this viral infection. In an epidemic that spreads in Harran, a military colonel named Kadir Suleiman, whose job is to protect scientists who are conducting research on the virus, then asks the GRE to move his brother, Hassan, who is paralyzed, so he can get out of the city. But the government refused and did not give permission to all residents of Harran to leave the city because it could carry the virus out of there and cause a worldwide pandemic. Due to his physically handicapped and weak body condition, Hassan finally died after being attacked by people who had been infected with the virus, who was referred to as infected. The death of his brother greatly shook Kadir and made him feel angry and blamed the government and the GRE for Hassan's death. Kadir, who was filled with anger, then took revenge by stealing research data on the Harran virus, or THV, from GRE scientists.
Someone blamed the GRE for Hassan's death. He stole a highly sensitive file,
which turned out to have the potential to be a cure for the viral infection. After escaping with the important data, Kadir formed a group consisting of former soldiers and city dwellers who began to lose faith in the government and the GRE in dealing with the virus epidemic in Harran. In this game, players will assume the role of Kyle Crane, an undercover GRE agent sent to infiltrate the quarantine zone to find Kadir Suleiman and reclaim the research files. At the beginning of the game, a GRE agent named Kyle Crane is shown, who is parachuted into Harran to retrieve important virus research data that has been stolen by Kadir Suleiman, who uses it for blackmail. Arriving in Harran, Crane was immediately confronted by the infected, where Crane was bitten by one of the infected. Crane was rescued by two local residents, namely Amir and his girlfriend, Jade Aldemir, where Amir had to die in the end to save Crane. Jade then injects antizin into Crane's body to suppress the infection. After that, Crane was then taken to a survivor's shelter called the Tower. Crane is then introduced to Rahim Aldemir, Jade's younger brother, who says that he and his sister are members of the Runners faction, which is tasked with gathering food supplies for the survivors living in the Tower. The Runners faction is led by a man named Harris Brecken. To return the favor of being saved, Crane decides to help the survivors living in the Tower. Seeing Crane's sincerity, Rahim then taught him the basics of Parker, which is very important for the Runners members to master to avoid chasing the infected and reach various difficult locations to collect food and medicine supplies. In his training, Crane began to feel the effects of antizin begin to wear off, and he again felt the symptoms of a zombie virus infection. Therefore, Rahim also suggested that Crane see Dr. Imran Zir, who turned out to be one of the GRE scientists who was still trapped in Harran. Dr. Zier then injects antizin into Crane's body while revealing that he is still working on developing a drug that can stop viral infections with one of his colleagues, Dr. Alan Camden. But their efforts were hindered by communication access because it turned out that Dr. Camden was trapped in another area of the city of Harran. After his condition improved, Crane then continued training and helped the runners collect supplies of food and medicine that GRE routinely sent with airdrops. Crane eventually learns that the tower is frequently harassed by a group of bandits led by a warlord named Rise, who has stolen and stockpiled supplies from GRE airdrops. One of them is antizin, a drug that slows the infection process and suppresses symptoms. Due to the last attack launched by the bandits, several members of the runners are killed and Brecken is injured. Crane then offers to take part in a mission to collect supplies with the runners, where he is tasked with reaching an airdrop containing antizin that the survivors in the tower desperately need as their supplies run low. Crane then reports his findings of the bandits to GRE, where he concludes that Rise is Kadir Suleiman in disguise and goes by the name Rise. But surprisingly, GRE instructs Crane to destroy the airdrop and buy medicine from Rise to confirm his identity, whether Rise is indeed Kadir Suleiman or someone else.
So if you find an airdrop containing antizin, destroy it.
Crane reluctantly obeys GRE's orders and is forced to lie to the tower that supplies have been looted. Because Crane failed in his mission, Harris Brecken then assigned Crane to negotiate a deal with Rise so they could get antizin supplies. Crane was notified of the bandits' headquarters, fought alone against the infected, and headed there. Arriving there, Crane finally met Rise and confirmed that Rise was indeed Kadir Suleiman. Crane then offers to work with Rise, and in return, Rise will reward him with the antizin that the survivors in the tower desperately need. Rise accepts Crane's offer and assigns him to fix the antenna on the signal tower so that his group can communicate smoothly. On the other hand, it turns out that the signal tower can improve communication between Rise's group, and communication between Dr. Zier and Dr. Camden, and also communication between other groups of survivors in Harran City. Crane then reported to GRE about the identity of Rise, who was indeed Kadir Suleiman.
Just met Rise. There's no question that's Suleiman.
After that, Crane performs a series of unethical tasks for Rise, assuming that he will be given 2 chests of antizin. But Rise betrays him by only giving him 5 bottles. Rise tells Crane that he will give more antizin if he brings him Jade, which Crane refuses, although GRE orders Crane to hand over Jade to Rise to gain Rise's trust. After returning to the tower, Crane found that more and more survivors were starting to become infected due to the lack of antizin supply. Not only that, but he also learned that GRE had decided to stop the regular supply of food and antizin to the city of Harran. Crane then contacted GRE to keep sending supplies.
Start the antizin drops again, at least near the tower.
But they refused and said that the Harran city government had other plans and asked Crane to focus on completing his mission. Desperate for antizin, Crane and Jade attack Rise's storage facility and find an explosive storage area. Even so, the two of them still took the explosives to use as a defense. Arriving at the tower, Rahim suggested that they use explosives to bomb the nests of the infected to more freely collect supplies. Despite Crane's objections, in the end he agrees with Rahim's plan. However, while carrying out the plan, Rahim is injured, and Crane finally goes ahead with Rahim's plan and destroys all the infected in his lair. However, on his return, he discovers that Rahim was actually bitten and had become infected while he was gone, forcing him to kill him. While returning to the tower to inform Jade of Rahim's death, bandits suddenly came and attacked the tower and kidnapped Dr. Zier, who was trying to develop a cure for the virus, kidnapped by Rise. Crane tries to save him but is finally arrested because Rise knows his identity as a GRE agent. Rise later revealed that the files he stole contained evidence that GRE intended to weaponize the virus, not develop a cure, as they publicly said. In an attempt to escape, Crane manages to defeat Rise's henchmen and cut off one of Rise's arms. However, Dr. Zier eventually dies after telling Crane that he has assigned Jade to deliver his research files to Dr. Alan Camden. While Crane searches for Jade, he learns that the Ministry of Defense plans to bomb the city of Harran to eradicate the zombie outbreak and claims that there are no survivors.
Last survivor left in the quarantine.
With help from Brecken, Crane finally meets the Embers, a group of survivors living in the Old Town area, where he finally manages to contact Jade. But she refuses to talk to him about her brother's death. As the Ministry of Defense plans to bomb the city of Harran to end the zombie epidemic, Crane and the Embers try to warn the outside world by detonating a bomb on an apartment building with a sad face pattern. But a jet fires a missile that obscures the pattern, Crane then reactivates the radio tower and manages to alert the outside world to Harran's survivors, thwarting the Ministry's plans.
The Ministry of Defense have lied to you. There are still survivors inside the walls.
On the other hand, Rise captured Jade, who then steals Dr. Zier's research. Crane begins to succumb to his infection as he tries to find Jade. When he finally managed to find Jade, he realized that he had been bitten and would soon turn into the infected. Watching from a distance, Rise then offers him a dose of antizin to save himself or Jade. Crane intends to save Jade, but Jade chooses to sacrifice herself. Jade injects antizin into Crane's body at the last minute and protects him from Rise's men, before finally succumbing to the infection and turning to attack Crane, forcing Crane to kill her. After that, Crane confronted Rise's second commander, which he could finally kill him. In a desperate attempt to avoid a scandal, GRE then contacted Crane to take Dr. Zier's research and give it to them so that GRE could convince the public that they were indeed working on a drug to stop the viral infection, and in return GRE would safely remove Crane from the city of Harran. Crane considered the offer, but before that, he sent a sample of the infected tissue to Dr. Camden, who believed he was close to developing a drug to stop the virus infection, but still needed Dr. Zier's research data. Later, Crane discovers that Rise intends to give Dr. Zier's research to the GRE in exchange for safely extracting it from the city of Harran. Crane then attacks Rise's base and fights him on top of a skyscraper, just as the GRE helicopter appears. He finally manages to drop Rise from a height and recover Dr. Zier's research data, where he finally decides to give it to Dr. Camden and stays in the city of Harran to help the survivors who still survive there. Well, that's the ending of the game Dying Light 1. Now I will continue the discussion of the DLC entitled the following. Sometime after defeating Rise and handing Dr. Zier's research files to Dr. Camden, Crane learns from a near-death survivor about a drug that is supposed to cure viruses as well as people who are immune to viral infections. Since the tower was running out of stock of antizin supplies and Dr. Camden's efforts to produce a cure were still unsuccessful, Crane then decided to investigate people who were said to have immunity from infection with the virus to obtain a drug to cure the infected survivors so that they could survive, no longer dependent on antizin. Crane then heads to the countryside, where he eventually discovers that many of the survivors out there have converted to a religious sect called the Children of the Sun, who worship the Mother who appears to be the source of their immunity to the virus. To gain the cult's trust and learn more about immunity, Crane decides to help the survivors. Finally, one of the Faceless, a high-ranking cult member, approaches him and personally admits that their immunity is obtained through a special potion they find. But like antizin, it only suppresses the infection and doesn't completely cure it. The Faceless also reveal that they are also working on a permanent cure and promise that in exchange for his help, they will give Crane some medicine to bring back to Harran. Crane is then assigned to help a man named Attila, who is working on an important project for the Mother. Attila tells Crane that the Children of the Sun believe in a prophecy in which the Chosen One will rise to become the prophet of the God of the Sun and purify the infection. Attila also reveals that the Mother's true identity is Jasmine, the wife of a local military colonel who was involved in the experiment that caused the plague but was bitten during the plague. Before succumbing to the infection, the colonel then gave Attila a secret code that he passed on to Crane. Attila later committed suicide to invoke the prophecy, but it failed to happen. Crane later discovers that remnants of Rise gang have also traveled to the countryside in search of the drug. Rise henchmen then launch an attack on the Mother's base at a nearby dam. However, when Crane arrives there, he finds Rise and Faceless henchmen dead. Entering the dam, he finally discovers that the Mother has turned into a volatile sentient. The Mother reveals that the dam is a secret military facility that stores special chemicals. However, instead of being a cure for the virus, the potion slowly turns anyone who uses it into a sentient volatile, as happened to the Mother, where she can maintain her mental abilities during the day and has been given telepathic ability to communicate. Still, at night, she would become a wild, uncontrollable monster. The Mother then tells Crane that the only way to stop the infection is to summon the God of the Sun to purify the land, sacrificing everyone in Harran in the process. Crane can choose to obey the Mother or against it at this stage. If Crane chooses to oppose Mother, then she will attack him, forcing Crane to take the elixir and attempt to kill him, though Crane ultimately wins and kills the Mother. Taking what's left of the drug, Crane then leaves the dam, suffers constant blackouts, and finds himself in a populated area that appears to be outside the quarantine zone. Crane later discovered that his exposure to the herb had turned it into a sentient volatile. As night fell, the infected Crane let out a wild scream like the mother and her nearby children looked at the Crane with a frightened expression. If Crane chooses to listen to the mother, she will take Crane on a nuclear warhead that was originally meant to prevent an outbreak. Crane enters the code Attila gave him, which activates the warhead, which will destroy the entire city of Harran and kill all survivors and infections, wiping out the virus with them. Well, those are the two ending versions that you will get after playing Dying Light DLC. The following. Thank you for watching. Feel free to write your opinion about this game in the comments column.